Hello everyone, how are you? This is our live YouTube channel and this video will be for content analysis. Here in this video we will talk about content analysis in general. We will discuss its approaches, different approaches, and we'll start here with the first chapter. Okay, so this is a pocket guide which is mainly focusing on the three approaches of the content analysis, and this is the introduction. Actually, we have jumped on the preface. Okay, we can go back actually to the preface. Okay, in this preface we will understand the general idea of this book, that its main focuses on the three approaches of the content analysis. Here, as you can see, here in this line, it says that this method is used in social work and in allied disciplines and professions. Here, so where it is exactly used in social work, allied disciplines and professions. Okay, and here it says also that as of March, okay, here, okay, as you can read here with me, as of March 2015, the social work abstract, you gotta focus on this point because we will talk about it later. The social work abstract database showed like 551 publications in which content analysis was used as a specific research method. Okay, we will talk also about this later on, so just concentrate on this number. Okay, as you can see here, it says that this Oxford Pocket Guide offers a comprehensive overview. Okay, here. Okay, a comprehensive overview of a variety within content analysis, along with detailed descriptions of three approaches found in contemporary literature. Let's move on. This paragraph also in the next page is important. It talks about the three approaches. Here it says, in this book we describe and examine three key approaches to content analysis. What are the three content approaches of content analysis? This one is very important. You gotta focus on it. Okay, I'd like to highlight it. Okay, so it says, in this book, we've got three key approaches. The first approach is called the basic content analysis. Okay? So this one focuses on manifest content. The manifest content is the obvious content. This approach employs always statistical analysis. So here in this approach, we use statistics. And the second one is the interpretive content analysis. When we're talking about interpretive, you're focusing on interpretation. Okay, so you're not merely giving the facts, you're also explaining them. So here in the second one, you've got the interpretive content analysis. It focuses on both manifest and latent content. Okay, so you've got both the manifest and the latent content, which means the obvious ideas and also the underlined ones. Okay, those that are implied within the context. The third and the last one, which is the qualitative content analysis, and this approach focuses on both the latent and the manifest content. It also says that the interpretive and qualitative content analyses, they draw on narrative analysis methods rather than statistical analysis. So we should understand this point. The first approach, which is the basic, uses the statistics, okay? But the second and the third, which is the interpretive and the qualitative, both of them, they depend on the narrative, okay? or narrative analysis. Okay, they're mainly focusing on narratives, okay, because you're focusing on the latent content, okay. So this you just feel like that the second and the third are both qualitative, okay. However, the first one is quantitative, and we will talk about this later. Okay, so the content analysis or the content analytic is neither simple nor monolithic. Understanding the multiple approaches, these three approaches to content analysis now available, provides researchers with more choices, greater utility, and enhanced rigor for their projects. So the objective, what is the main goal of this book? The main goal is to help researchers expand their knowledge and fully understand the range of available tools in order to generate better research results. All this paragraph is important. Okay, let's jump on to this paragraph. Okay, here in this book, the researchers or the authors of this book draw a distinction between more basic content analysis, drawing on literal, as we said, they draw on literal and manifest content, and interpretive and qualitative approaches that emphasize both context and latent content, okay? It also says that in social work textbooks, content analysis is generally portrayed as drawing on manifest content in existing documents. Okay? Let's move on to the next page. Here it says that there are differences among these three methods based on what? Based on the use of deductive approaches to coding and analysis versus use of inductive approaches or use of both approaches in combination. Okay, so we will talk about the coding and how coding is done in these three approaches. We're mainly discussing here the first and the second. However, for the third, we will provide a general view. For the third one, we won't use it. So we will explore these three, as they say, these researchers, they will explore the three kinds, which is the deductive and the inductive and the mixed approaches. In this book also, they will examine the relatively new set of methods known as qualitative content analysis. Here in the number, in this paragraph, the fourth one, this one, here it says that one could argue that, look at this one could argue that all qualitative research addresses content, but how and why different methods are applied warrants further conceptualization and clarification. Okay, content analysis may share features with other qualitative and quantitative methods, but it is not identical to them. Okay, let's move on. All this is the preface. Okay, another limitation of the textbook approach to content analysis is a heavy emphasis on the use of existing or secondary data. Okay, let's move on. Okay, I think we gotta start with the first chapter, which is on page 14. Here is the introduction, which is the first chapter, in which we will provide a general, or explain the general idea in this chapter. Okay, let's highlight the most important idea here. Researchers do use word counts as a core analytic technique in basic content analysis, okay? However, researchers also use content analysis without statistical analysis in approaches called interpretive and qualitative. So this is one difference between between the first and both the second and the third one, is that the first one depends on the word counts, because you're mainly counting, okay? You can get a certain textbook and you can count all the appearances or all the occurrences of a certain phenomenon. For example, let's say the past tense, okay? So you have to count all the past tense verbs found in a certain text, and then you should gather all this information and describe all these informations in tables and statistics, okay? And you can use the persons, you can use all of these stuff in this first approach, which is the basic content analysis. However, we don't count in the second and the third approaches, okay? Okay, it here, as you can see, in these two approaches, researchers focus on narrative, describing the meaning of communications in specific contexts rather than on existing quantitative word counts. That's why we describe the first approach as being quantitative, because you're mainly focusing on the quantity, on the word counts, because you're only counting, you're not explaining why what you're counting, okay? That's why it's not interpretive. That's why it's not qualitative. The basic approach is quantitative because it depends on quantity, on how many occurrences are there, okay? Now let's move on to the next one. So these three varying approaches to content analysis have several similarities and some striking differences. They vary in the ways researchers conceptualize content and employ methods for collecting, coding, and analyzing data. Okay, let's move on to the next page, where we define the concept of content analysis. Okay, here, what is content analysis? Now, this definition is very important, which is provided by Krippendorf in 2013 on page 24. He defines content analysis generally as a research technique for making replicable and valid inferences from texts or other meaningful matter to the contexts of their use. Okay, so it's a research technique. This technique is used for researchers in different fields. It's not only used in EFL textbooks, which is for teaching English as a foreign language. The main idea or the main objective is making replicable and valid inferences from texts to the contexts of their use. Here, it also talks about here the manifest content. What do we mean by the manifest content? It means that everything that refers to what is overtly or literally present in the communication, in any kind of communication, anything that is overt, that it is literally present before you, you can count it, it's so easy. That's why it's called manifest. It is apparent. Okay, you can see it clearly. Okay, and here it says further, researchers most often use content analysis descriptively, but they may also use it to generate new concepts and theory and to test theory. We should understand that testing theories is used for the interpretive content analysis, the second one, okay? You're always testing, okay? However, the last one, which is the qualitative, you're not testing, you're generating new theories, new hypotheses, okay? So in the last one, we're always making new things. We generate new concepts. We generate new theory. This is so important. We have to focus on this point, and this will be also highlighted when we discuss the second, these approaches in general. Okay, let's read this one. It says, researchers can use content analysis to identify and document the attitudes, views, and interests of individuals, small groups, or large and diverse cultural groups. So that's why we use content analysis. We should focus on the attitudes, on the views, on interests of individuals or groups. Sometimes large groups. That's why it is used in the social work. Okay. Now let's go to the basic content analysis. This is, just a general view for the basic content analysis. We will talk in details in one separate video. Now it says here that the basic content analysis is defined by Burleson, here, 1952, as a research technique, as you can see here. It's a research technique for the objective, systematic, and quantitative description of manifest content of communication. So this is the most important thing to remember about the basic, is that it is used for presenting objective, systematic, and quantitative description of communication. How can we describe that? Through focusing on the manifest content of communication. How? With the use of statistics. Here it says that Neuendorf, in 2002, he similarly defines the basic content analysis as techniques used word counts or other quantitative analytic techniques. Neuendorf's definition would also disallow both interpretive and qualitative approaches to content analysis that do not use quantitative analytic methods. So this is important that he defines it as using word counts. So whenever we hear the word counts, this counting, statistics, because statistics is mainly focusing on the word counts. So when we say word counts, we're actually focusing on the frequency of word or passage uses is treated as a technique to determine the relative importance of specific content. As we all know that whenever you see something that is repeated over and over, it is focused on. So you understand the main purpose of the author through his use of frequent words. So the use of these words, the repeated ones, okay, shows the importance of this content. Okay, here it also says that the basic content analysis are those approaches using word counts and other quantitative analytic methods to analyze data. Basic content analysts code mainly manifest data using deductively or inductively generated code lists. Quantitative criteria are used to determine the reliability and validity of the coding processes. Okay, so let's stop here. We should understand then that the basic content analyses use word counts, they use quantitative analytic methods, and they use code lists. Okay, now what are the kinds of code lists used by the basic content analysis? You can use both the deductive and the inductive code lists. What do we mean by deductive and inductive code lists? Now, anything that is deductive, that it is mainly ready for use. So they are generally code lists that are used previously by other researchers. So you can adopt them and and use them as your research basis in your research. So these are ready for use. That's why it's called deductive. However, if you want to examine a certain phenomenon, let's say for example a globalization in 10th grade English textbook in Jordan, let's say, for example. Now, in this case, you use the main categories and quotes used by a certain author who previously examined the same phenomenon in his job. Okay, so you mainly take all the quotes and the categories he used in his research. That's why it's called deductive. However, if you find that his categories were not sufficient, they were insufficient, that's why you can use your own quotes. How can I use my own quotes? Through your previous, through depending on your previous knowledge and experience, you can use, you can adopt your own quote lists. You can get your own categories. It depends on your much reading and your experience and your knowledge regarding a certain matter. So this is the difference between deductive and inductive. Here it says at the end, in basic content analysis, your research must be systematic, descriptive, and transparent. And this is so important. Let's go to the second approach here, just a main idea here. Here, Osgood defines a more interpretive approach to content analysis, that is the interpretive, okay? He says that it is a procedure or a research technique. However, Osgood says that it is a procedure by which one makes inferences about sources and receivers of communication from evidence in messages they exchange. So you must have evidence in your messages. Holstein similarly defines content analysis more interpretively as any technique for making inferences by objectively, okay, by how? By objectively and systematically identifying specific characteristics of messages. Okay, here in interpretive content analysis, we're focusing on both manifest and latent content. So we're counting here. You're not focusing on words. You're not focusing on only the manifest content. You're focusing on both the manifest and latent content. However, we don't do this in basic content analysis. We only focus on the manifest content. Let's move on to the next page. It is so important for the interpretive analysis here is that the latent content. What do we mean by latent content analysis? Anything that is latent means that it is implied. It is not overt. It is not, manifest. It is not apparent. So the latent content refers to meaning that is not overtly evident in a communication. Latent content is implicit. It is hidden. It is implied by a certain communication, often across several sentences or paragraphs. So not only it can be implied in certain sentences, it can, move on to paragraphs. Berg here defines latent content as the symbolism underlying physically present data. Burleson uses semiotic theory to distinguish denotative and connotative meanings of communications in any form. What do we mean by those two words, which are the denotative, this one, and the connotative? These two words are so important, as you can remember that the dictionary meanings, or the meanings implied in the dictionary, uses the denotative meaning, which means the direct meaning, okay? So, like, for example, like you can say, it's a fox, okay? And I can describe a certain person as a fox. He's fox, okay? That he is not direct. This person is dangerous. This person has his certain intentions, okay? So here, when we say this is a fox, or it is a fox, we're here talking about an animal, which is a fox, okay? This is the denotative meaning. But if I say that she's so rude, or she's so this person is complicated, or anything like that, like we can describe her action as something implicit, as something manifest. Okay, like I want to describe how much he is deceitful, for example, that he deceives people. I can describe him as a fox. Okay, this is the connotative meaning. Okay, let's move on. Here it says, it actually explains this, the thing that we've previously said. Denotative meanings, the manifest content, are first order signifiers. Okay, corresponding to literal, common sense, or obvious meanings. So this is the denotative meaning, that it is literal, something that is obvious, that is clear to you, that is common sense. Okay. However, the connotative meanings drawn from the latent content, that you understand it through the implied meaning of the sentence. These meanings, they are arrived at by combining individual elements in a text to understand the meaning of the whole. Okay? Okay, the latent content here, it says, allows researchers to interpret the whole or the gestalt of the communication. Note that many forms of everyday speech, such as irony, sarcasm, and double meanings, all these are examples of the connotative meanings. These meanings require active interpretation of communications rather than relying solely on the manifest content. So if you want to criticize a certain person, okay, you don't say that he's deceitful, for example, or you don't say that he's complicated. You can use certain descriptions, okay, to express your intention. As for the context, this word is so important in the second and the third approaches. Okay, it is another vital component of understanding the meaning of messages. Okay, let's move on here. It says, that is, both basic and interpretive or qualitative approaches to content analysis require carefully defined and transparently reported descriptions of how the researchers collected, coded, and analyzed the target materials. The authors in all the three approaches should explain to the readers how he collected, how he analyzed, and how he, concluded all the results found in the analysis. Okay, it is so important. Readers should know how these things were done. Okay, let's go to the second or to the next page. Here it says, about the interpretive content analyses. The interpretive content analysis, which is this one, we're discussing now the second one. Those analyses are those approaches using researcher-generated summaries and interpretations rather than word counts or other quantitative analytic methods. This is so important. This is a huge difference between this one, which is the interpretive, and the previous one, which is the basic one. The basic content analysis focuses on counting, focuses on the quantitative approach. However, the interpretive, you use your own summaries, your own interpretations. You're explaining a certain phenomenon, so you should provide evidences from the context. That's why the context is mainly focused on in this approach. So you're not focusing on the word counts. The analysis unit here in this interpretive content analysis is your interpretations, your explanations of both the manifest and the latent communication content. Okay, through the use of inductively generated code lists. Okay, here we don't use deductively generated code lists, we use only the inductively ones. Okay, here it says that researchers use qualitative criteria here. We don't use quantitative in interpretive content analysis, okay? You should remember that we use qualitative content analysis here to determine the reliability and validity of the analytic processes through or though these quantitative terms are still employed. So again, here we should understand that we're mainly focusing on the inductively generated code lists, and my purpose is to determine the reliability and validity of my results. Okay. Here it says that the interpretive content analysis seeks to be systematic and transparent, but do not necessarily assume objectivity. And this is another difference. The basic content analysis focuses on objective analysis. You must provide systematic and objective analysis. Here in the second one, which is the interpretive, we don't provide anything objective. Why? Because you're mainly talking about yourself. So it is not objective, it is subjective. Okay? Now let's talk about another idea, which is validity and reliability are still widely used here in the interpretive content analysis. This analysis may overlap with some not very well articulated qualitative research methods, such as thematic analysis. Okay, so it can overlap with a thematic analysis. What do we mean by thematic? When we're talking about themes, you're talking about meanings. And when you talk about meanings, you talk about interpretations, because you interpret meanings, which can be of two kinds, which is connotative or denotative. That's why this interpretive content analysis can overlap with the thematic analysis. Okay, interpretive content analysis is a flexible research method that may explore key storylines, subjects and objects of texts, normative possessions, and the methods used to claim these possessions. Now let's move on to the third one, which is qualitative content analysis. It is actually very recent, okay? That's why we don't have much knowledge about it. We don't have much epistemology on this approach. So it is relatively recent approach. It is an approach of empirical, methodological, controlled analysis of texts within the context of communication. Of course, here you follow rules and step-by-step models without rash quantification. There's no quantification, actually. We don't depend on quantitative here, quantitative analysis. We are adopting the qualitative content analysis here, because it's mainly its name, it is qualitative, it's not quantitative, so it's not like the basic. Okay, based on the interpretation of texts focused by the researchers' chosen questions, qualitative content analysis seeks to develop carefully specified categories that are revised and refined in an interactive feedback loop process to ensure credibility and usefulness. This is so important here that we use our own code lists, okay? Why? To focus on credibility, on the usefulness. Why should I make a new theory here? What is my purposes? What are my purposes in this? Okay? So the third one, which is the qualitative content analysis, differs from the first and the second ones in that it provides new theories. Okay? Here, the analysis of text in qualitative content analysis involves both the inductive definition of categories and the deductive application of these categories to additional data. So you don't use the deductive application only, you can use the inductive definition of categories. So both of them are allowed. Okay. Now, what about the content analysis across approaches? Again, we should understand that whatever kind of content analysis we use, this content analysis, as it is italicized here, it is a structured, systematic research approach. We should understand the word systematic, okay? That it depends on certain methodologies. It is not random. That's why we call it structured. It is systematic. You use it just like a scientific process. You use it in steps, one by one, gradually. You use specific or specified research designs and methods. You don't do it randomly. We make in order, which is the purpose of content analysis in general, whatever its approaches, we make replicable and valid inferences from texts and similar materials. The more quantitatively oriented researchers emphasize validity, reliability, and objectivity. As we said, this is actually found in the basic content analysis that we focus on objectivity. You should remember this. This is the first and most important, difference between these approaches. This is for what? This is for the quantitative. So in the quantitative oriented research, you use only the objective one because you're mainly focusing on quantity, okay? The word counting. So you must be objective. You don't interfere in the results. You don't have any kind of control over it. That's why you're only having some data before you. You're describing them without any interference from you as a researcher. While the more qualitatively oriented researchers, they emphasize validity, replicability, and transparency. Okay, so here we don't have reliability in qualitative content analysis. We have the word replicability. Replicable, that it is able to be applied in other researches. Here in reliability, this word is so important. Reliability in quantitative content analysis means that if you want to conduct the study again, you would have the same results. That's why it's called reliability. You have to get the same results as the first results that you received in your first research. Okay, what about the data types and sources? Here, we should understand that the data types can be read. Others view texts more broadly as objects that can be interpreted to convey an informative message. That is, to researchers, text actually refers to a wide range of communication media that can be stored in many different formats. Now, content analysis, we should understand that it is not used only for textbooks or for books or for journals or for any kind of printed material. It shouldn't be always written. You can hear it. So you can sometimes watch a certain program, okay, and you can content analyze it. There's no problem. So you can content analyze even all the posts, all the tweets, all the posts on Facebook, on different social media. So there is no problem. That's why content analysis is used in many fields. Okay, so it says here that it should not always be written. You can hear it. It can be shown. It can be heard. Okay, so here it says that researchers have applied content analysis to text, audio recordings, television shows and movies, images and telephone calls also, as well as to many forms of electronic data, now including social media. Researchers may transcribe some of these other materials into written texts or transcripts, but this is always done with the loss of some information. This is what should we focus on. Yes, that's okay if you want to content analyze a movie or image or a telephone call which with only maybe 2 minutes, that lasts for 2 minutes, okay? But the limitation here, or the obstacle here, is the loss of information. What do we mean by loss of information? For example, transcripts of electronically recorded, for electronically recorded interviews routinely lose the speaker's prosody, which is the rhythm of speech, and tone of voice and inflection. So the tone of voice is lost. I don't have this tone of voice. I don't understand with the written text, when that is inverted or converted from a telephone call, for example. I don't understand if the speaker is giving me a kind of irony, or criticizing, in a way that it seems like he is happy with a certain matter, but actually he's criticizing it. So we don't understand this, for example, tone of voice. I'm not understanding if he's angry or if he's happy with it, So this constitutes a loss of information and detail from the message's original form. However, transcripts may nonetheless capture the core overt content of the message. While all content analyses focus on content, some also address form and format. In another example here, a content analysis of the images used in advertisements or propaganda may address particular attending to where an image is located, its size, and context in which it is placed. We can now go to the definition, a quick definition for the content analysis. We define it as a family of research techniques for making systematic, credible, or valid and replicable inferences from texts and other forms of communication. So it is systematic, it is replicable, and it is credible. This is the most important thing. Now let's move on to the origins and history of content analysis. The early origins of content analysis are found in political differences and in advocacy efforts. Krippendorf and Bach point to an early form of content analysis addressing differences in the content of religious hymns. So it was, originated, or it was, it started from the hymns. How can that be? In 1743, the Swedish state church was concerned that the content of hymns created by unsanctioned sources differed from their formally approved content. So while contemporary analysts found few actual differences in the content of sanctioned and unsanctioned hymns, methods of counting words and the context of their usage anticipated what have become the core methods of today's content analysis. So what did they actually do? They focused on word counting while analyzing the hymns, now we should understand that the summary description of actual hymn content was a useful, empirical based part of a larger disagreement. And we should say that Krippendorf and Bach also found an early form of content analysis in a political commentary published in the New Hampshire Spy newspaper on November 1787. So this is another example, or another case where content analysis were used, or were actually first used, which is the early form of it, in politics. How was that? It was used in the New Hampshire Spy newspaper. And we should understand that the well-born 9 times aristocracy, how much the word aristocracy was, used. It was used 18 times. And how many, how words were used in the text. So first it was used in religious contexts. Second, it was used in the politics field. Now let's move on here to the next page. Okay, we should understand that, speaking on the spy article, which was used in politics, okay, that depended on the word count, which is the basic content analysis, we should understand that the larger the font size, the more frequently the word was used within the speech. So, as you can see, this is the example actually from this newspaper. You can see that some words were larger than others. Some words were capitalized. This actually was to show its importance. Okay, so if you want to highlight a certain point or a certain idea, you can maximize the size. You can highlight it. You can put it in the bold. Okay, use of highlighting indicates that the specified word was used more than the average frequency. There, as you can see, this is another example, okay? But this is from the New York Times in July 2011. Another example, okay? Look at the word work, generation. They are capitalized, okay? They are actually, their sizes are larger than any other word. That's why it is more capitalized. It shows its frequency, its importance, okay? So the word here, it says that the word clouds share with the basic content analysis the use of word counts to describe and analyze textual data. Let's go now to the origins of academic content analysis. Here we're talking about the word academic. You should focus on this. Okay, so where do you think was the academic content analysis used? It was used actually in sociology and journalism. You're talking about 1910s, okay? Here they say that the German sociologists in 1910, Max Weber, advocated for the formal analysis of newspaper content. Actually, he's the first one. Actually, Max Weber is the first one who used it in academia, okay? Now, Weber sought formal research to describe and document the changes in newspaper content across generations. What did he actually do? He specifically pointed to the merits of analyzing advertisements as a source of data to describe trends in social change. Max Weber, he wanted to focus on, the changes that happened in using the advertisements in journals. Okay, that's why it was used in sociology and journalism. That's why content analysis was used. Okay, he wants to describe the trends in social change. This was his objective. That's why he used the content analysis. Okay, and he wanted actually to show the trends, as we said, which is mainly the national, to determine the national and regional differences in interests and concerns of people. He wanted to see how people differed across ages and across generations. Okay, let's go now to the second paragraph. He applied content analysis. We're talking about the same person, which is Max Weber. He applied content analysis to the letters of an Irish immigrant to the United States in an effort to understand her personality. And during World War II, content analysis was employed by Allied governments to examine military intelligence. So here we can highlight this use, which is the letters of an Irish immigrant, to understand his or her personality. It was a female immigrant, an Irish one, who wanted to migrate to the United States. Okay, this content analysis was used in identifying her personality. Okay, another thing, as we said here, that it was used in military intelligence in the Second World War. Okay, what did they do actually? Okay, here we can say that the use of content analysis in the war fields, because of trying to interpret the messages of soldiers, okay, because they wanted to convert or to send a real or an authentic message that is different from the from what we hear. So we're talking about the implied or the connotative meaning. Okay, so we are discussing what we say, the interpretive content analysis. So we can say that the use of content analysis was used later in the war in the World War II, because to focus on these on showing or understanding implied meaning of these messages. Okay, and here we should say that the use of contextual factors to make relevant and useful interpretations from content was vital to the effectiveness of this effort. Okay, here about the military intelligence work, it expanded content analysis from summarizing and describing overt media content to include a more interpretive, holistic, and contextual analytic approach, as we just said. Now let's go to the use of content analysis in social work. When can we say that it appeared in social work? We say that it appeared in social work in 1940s. Let's go now to this important paragraph. Researchers hypothesized that clients' reduced use of distress words would demonstrate. Before we read this, we should understand that we have psychologists here called Dollard and Motor. Okay, they wanted to use the content analysis in social work. They were actually the first people who did this. Okay, what did they actually do? These researchers, Dollard and Motor, they wanted to evaluate the casework service effectiveness. They hypothesized that casework effectiveness could be demonstrated through the reduced use of distress-related words by clients. Okay, whenever you use, whenever you see words that show distress, you know that this person is, suffers from a certain issue. Okay, so what did they do? Actually, let's read. They hypothesized that clients' reduced use of distress words would demonstrate improvement compared to pre-treatment status. They then developed a measure. What was the measure's name? It was called the discomfort relief quotient, based on the frequency of word use found in client case records. This measurement, or this measure, was simply the number of discomfort comments found in case records divided by the number of discomfort plus relief comments. Of course, to calculate this measure, each case record had to be carefully read and coded. Further, Dollard and Motor had to first identify a list of words that reflected various kinds of distress. Along with a list of words or phrases that reflected relief, they found that their method was reliable and that several words, phrases, or complete sentences were equally reliable for calculating the measure. That's okay, there's no problem. But what was the actual problem? So they were mainly counting. Can you see that? They were counting words related to distress, and then they used some kind of calculations. They divided the number of words that referred to distress over those that didn't, okay, in order to get some statistics showing if a person suffers from distress or not. The problem was with the coding. Okay. However, they also found that different raters could produce very different results when studying the same content. That is a problem. We should not have different results. The different results were because of the use of different codes. That's why they should, unify the codes used. Okay, so these results show the need for thorough coder training and ongoing efforts to establish the reliability or consistency of content analysis coding. So the problem was with the coding, we need more coding training. Okay, now let's move on. But you can say we should understand that their work were so important. Dollard and Motor used newly generated data as the source in their content analysis job. They examined, the content analysis. It's actually a new phenomenon, and what they did was great. Their work provided an evidence-grounded method for the evaluation of social work practice that I can describe and I can understand a certain social problem with the use of word for counting, with the use of analysis. I want to analyze the content. Okay, now let's talk about content analysis today. Contemporary newspaper articles frequently summarize how the media characterizes a politician, sports figure, or an artist over a certain period of time. And this is so popular now that you want to analyze a certain person. Okay, there's no problem. So this is called informal content analysis. Many negatively connected verbs would indicate dislike or disapproval. Many positive verbs would indicate liking or support. So the actual challenge here in content analysis is the identification of code lists. Okay, whenever we have, sufficient code lists, there's no problem. Your content analysis will be so good. Here it says that the formal content analysis draw on this general approach but require much greater rigor and specificity. Here, the first one, as we said now, which is the informal content analysis, you can use it, you can find it in many journals, in many magazines, for the sport figure, for any artist. But the formal one should be used with more, care, rigor, and specificity. Just what materials are included and why must be carefully determined. You should always tell the readers what you're doing. Just what materials researchers code as meaningful and how they go about this coding must also be justified and clearly defined. Finally, how researchers summarize the data must be rigorously determined. Research applications of content analysis should be transparent in methods, valid, and replicable. Okay, let's move on to the last paragraph in this section. Basic content analysis may be viewed as a hybrid research approach. It routinely involves coding unstructured data, which is a core technique of qualitative research. However, the coded data are most often analyzed and reduced using descriptive statistics, a core technique of quantitative research. Here, content analysis requires knowledge. You must have knowledge, you must have experience, you must have skills derived from both qualitative and quantitative research. It's a research method that combines techniques from both research traditions. In contrast, what researchers call mixed methods today integrates entire distinct quantitative and qualitative studies. Okay, the last thing here is about the mixed methods, which means both quantitative and qualitative. So if you want to define it, they employ complete quantitative and qualitative research studies within a project to gain different perspectives on the study question. The content analysis may combine qualitative and quantitative techniques into a single study method. There's no problem. You should understand that you can have both of them, quantitative and qualitative, at the same time in the same study. Okay? There's no problem. It is more of a hybrid or blended research methodology than a true form of mixed methods research, combining separate qualitative and quantitative studies. If you want to go to the examples of some social work content analysis, we've got an example here on Horton and Hawkins. Here's an example. Okay. Horton and Hawkins completed a basic content analysis of intervention research reported in social work dissertations. So they only focused on dissertations made in the field of social work, and they wanted to analyze the intervention research. They deductively developed a coding list of terms that they argue encompasses the concept of intervention research. They examined 252 social work dissertations completed in the year 2006, and they found that 13.49% of these dissertations focused on social work practice interventions. Calling this a small percentage in this area or in this era of evidence-based practice, they argued for a change in social work education. Okay. Now, we should understand here in this section that content analysis projects require careful training of coders. We have previously said that it is important to have training for codes to ensure that those coders are coding the same content, okay, depending on the same criterion. Okay. Here, it's important to understand that the research team used discussion among the raters to resolve these differences. If, of course, there must be some kind of differences in analyzing data. That's why it's important to meet and to discuss all these differences, leading to full agreement on distinguishing national versus international content. Through this process, the authors generated a population of 707 research articles in these 3 research journals. This is another example, actually. But we should understand that there must be discussion among coders regarding the coding process. Okay. Here, more examples later on, as you can see. Okay, this study concluded that there has been an overall increase in international research published in these 3 social work research journals between 1995 and 2004. You know, this comes as a continuation of another example on content analysis in social work. Okay. Here they say that the content analysis simply documents the trends in international research publications. It does not indicate what proportion should address this topic, you know. And, you know, it's more about, you know, that study found. Okay. Another example is another content analysis, you know, example on social work. You know, one study that addresses issues of interpretation in coding and in data analysis. For example, Finn and Dillon, they report their use of content analysis in teaching social work research courses. Okay, and in this study, here it says that personal ads are of course very short and often use abbreviations. Students in this analysis developed their own codes for the ads in work group teams. Teams compared their codes and assessed their inter-rater reliability. They then compared and contrasted their coding schemes to those found in a prior study by Willis and Carlson on sex roles in singles ads. Now we should understand. We want to focus. I want to focus on the inter-rater reliability. We've got inter-rater and we've got outer. The inter-rating means that you do a certain, you know, rating or analysis within, okay, with yourself, okay, that you compare the results of, you know, of your study, okay, by yourself. However, if you're talking about the outer one, you're comparing the results of your studies with people from other, you know, with other people, with other researchers. Okay, here more explanation on the on some examples. You can read it, enjoy reading it. Okay, by this we end the first chapter of content analysis. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.